Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Constable Richard Shin, Public Information Officer for Peel Regional Police, and I'd like to take this time to ask that everyone to ensure that your cell phones and devices have been silenced. On behalf of Peel Regional Police, I want to thank you for joining us today and welcome you to the Emile Kolb Center for Excellence here in Mississauga. We begin today by first acknowledging that the land on which we gather is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. For thousands of years, Indigenous peoples have inhabited and cared for this land and continue to do so today. In particular, we acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwa-Chippewa peoples, the land that is home to the Métis, and most recently, the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who are direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land, and by doing so, give our respect to its first inhabitants. Today, we are here to share the results of Project Sledgehammer. At the conclusion of this announcement, there will be an opportunity for questions. I would ask that you limit your questions to one question and one follow-up, and to be specific to Project Sledgehammer. A media relations officer can be available after the end of the conference for any unrelated questions. A media release will be issued shortly after the conclusion of this conference and will include links to all of the information provided here today. A full video of the conference will also be available on the Peel Regional Police YouTube channel. Today, we will hear from the following speakers: Chief Nishan Duraiappah, Detective Sergeant Chris Fiore, Deputy Chief Nick Milinovich, and Regional Chair Nando Iannicca, Chair of the Police Services Board. I would now like to call upon Chief Duraiappah.
Thank you, Richard, and I appreciate everyone being here today for this announcement of the results of Project Sledgehammer. This project is another example of the evidence of police services' commitment to tackling and fighting illegal firearms possession as well as drug trafficking, not just here in our community, but across the GTA. Joining me today is Chair Nando Iannicca, Chair of the Peel Regional Police Services Board, but also Chair of the Region of Peel. Thank you, sir, for being here. Deputy Chief Nick Milinovich, who is the head of our Regional Investigative Services Command and Emergency Services. Mr. Rob Serpier, the Executive Director of Peel Police Services Board. Mr. Omar Khan from the board as well. But also have Detective Sergeant Chris Fiore, who's going to be speaking later, who oversees our Specialized Enforcement Bureau, who has the details of the investigation as well. This operation was led by the exceptional, I'm going to say the exceptional officers, women and men, who focus on illegal firearms possession, drug trafficking, and belong to our Specialized Enforcement Bureau. Needless to say, illegal firearms, which we've seen right across the GTA in multiple announcements, are connected to multiple crimes in our community that have significant impact. Today we're talking about drug trafficking, but it also leads to deadly outcome here in Peel. And the work of our officers on a daily basis continue to negate and turn the dial down on these pressures that we can say are not tolerated here in Peel. And I want to thank them specifically for that. They unfortunately can't be in front of the camera, so we have the privilege of speaking to them. But we want to highlight on what it prevents in our community. The surge of illegal firearms, not just here in Peel and the GTA, pose a significant threat. In reality, here in Peel, we have seized more firearms than we have in any year previously. On average, we're seeing an illegal firearm seized by our officers just slightly over 30 hours. Every 30 hours, we're seizing a firearm. This isn't exclusive to the Peel area, but the GTA and the province itself. The number of shootings we've seen here in Peel exceed more than we've ever seen in years previously. I can say the majority of these legal firearms are smuggled into Ontario through criminal networks, and the origins we know are from the US. And these criminal networks are looking to capitalize on our community to make profit, victimize the vulnerable. Approximately 90% of these firearms that we seize are directly traced back to the US. And I can say in reality, the remaining 10% are likely also from the US. They just reflect the ability of the difficulty we have on tracing some of these firearms because they've been de-identified. When these firearms arrive in our community and become more easily accessible, the rate of violence and vulnerability in our community is undeniable. It leads to devastating consequences, not just for the victims, but it has a ripple effect on people's reality and perception of safety here in Peel. While our service has and will continue to work with partners to fill the gaps that are causing this trend, we will also continue to devote resources necessary to stop this. And this project, Project Sledgehammer, is one of the examples of the gold standards that our police enforcement do in defense of our community. You'll hear from Project Sledgehammer the arrest of 5 individuals and 160 charges, the seizure of numerous firearms, a variety of illegal weapons, prohibited magazines, several hundred rounds of ammunition, and specifically in this investigation, the seizure of 53 Glock selector switches, which turn handguns into fully automatic weapons. More importantly, the arrest signifies the prevention of crime, which we can only speculate what would have happened across the GTA. Each item you see displayed actually symbolizes a potential victim, a community that has been prevented from seeing harm. These items aren't just sitting on a table. They represent a carjacking, a home invasion, armed robberies, and multiple firearms offenses that would have plagued the GTA and Peel region. Each individual family and community member here in Peel deserves more. We want them to have a safe, vibrant community for businesses, work, for youth to go to school, for people to feel safe at home alone. And removing these firearms and drugs from our neighborhoods is one key element to making sure that we can achieve that. The individuals of our Specialized Enforcement Bureau are remarkable, and this is just one example of their astounding work that they do. I do want to acknowledge the partnership and support from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Waterloo Regional Police, and York Regional Police for their assistance in the execution of warrants during this project. Without their collaboration, we would not have been able to do this. It underscores the ability for police agencies to support each other to tackle these issues that are GTA-wide. Lastly, I do want to acknowledge the continued support of our Peel Police Services Board for ensuring that we're advocated for and resourced for, and the Region of Peel for their ongoing support so we can continue to do this work. It highlights that when we do have the resources, we can actually do some work and put a dent in this. Now I'm pleased to turn the mic over to Detective Sergeant Chris Fiore of our Specialized Enforcement Bureau to discuss the details of Project Sledgehammer.
Thank you, Chief. Afternoon. I'm Detective Sergeant Chris Fiore, and I'm the officer in charge of the Gun and Gang Team within the Specialized Enforcement Bureau. As the Chief mentioned, this investigation started with a traffic stop by a uniformed officer. As a result of that, a 20-year-old man was charged with various firearms offenses and later released on an ankle bracelet. As a result of that arrest, my team initiated a follow-up investigation. During this investigation, associates of the first suspect were identified, and evidence was obtained that led investigators to believe that they were involved in firearms and drug trafficking. Search warrants were obtained and executed at 3 residences in Brampton, 1 residence in Waterloo, and 1 storage facility within Caledon. The results of those search warrants were the seizure of 11 firearms, including assault rifles, handguns, and a submachine gun, which is displayed here, approximately 900 rounds of ammunition, 85 prohibited devices, including Glock selector switches, which, as the Chief mentioned, can transform a semi-automatic handgun to fully automatic, and high-capacity drum magazines. Approximately 200 grams of cocaine was seized with an estimated street value of $20,000, 20 grams of opium, 80 oxycodone pills, and 100 other unknown pills that were sent for testing. 5 subjects were arrested and have been charged with various offenses. Navdeep Nagra, 20 years old, of Brampton, has been charged with 11 counts of unauthorized possession of a firearm, 8 counts of possession of a loaded firearm, 84 counts of possession of a prohibited device, and 2 counts of failing to comply with a release order. He was held pending a bail hearing. Ravneet Nagra, 22 years old, of Brampton, has been charged with unauthorized possession of a firearm, possession of a loaded firearm, and possession of a prohibited device. He was released with a future court date. Narinder Nagra, 61 years, of Brampton, is charged with unauthorized possession of a firearm, possession of a loaded firearm, and possession of a prohibited device. She was released with a future court date. Ranveer Erich, 20 years old, of Brampton, has been charged with 9 counts of unauthorized possession of a firearm, 6 counts of possession of a loaded firearm, 30 counts of possession of a prohibited device, and possession of property obtained by crime. He was held in custody pending a bail hearing. Pavneet Nahal, 21 years old, of Brampton, has been charged with 2 counts of possession for the purpose of trafficking and failed to comply with a release order. He has been released with a future court date. At this time, we have received the tracing reports back for the seized firearms, which show that 4 originated in the United States, 5 originated in Canada, 2 of which were stolen, and 2 could not be traced due to serial number issues. This concludes my overview of this investigation. If there are any questions at the end, please note that this case is still before the courts, and as such, I will not be able to speak to many specifics of the investigation. I will also not be speaking to any of the investigative techniques that were utilized. Thank you, and I will turn it over to Deputy Chief Milinovich.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chris. And thank you to everybody who has joined us here today. On the heels of the conversation and what Chris just highlighted, I think it's important for us to emphasize 2 critical points that will illustrate the value of the outcomes of what you see here before you today. The first is the urgent issue of illegal firearms in our communities and the rise in their prevalence. As you have heard, the firearms seized in this investigation represent a significant threat to our community. These weapons could have inflicted devastating harm to our community. And the reality is we're facing a situation unlike any we ever have here in Peel, across the GTA, and throughout the province. The Chief mentioned we are seizing an illegal firearm approximately every 30 hours here in Peel. In Peel, we have already exceeded the number of illegal firearms that we seized all of last year. From January to September of this year, we've taken 157 illegal firearms off the street. That makes an 87% increase in our seizures. In the first 9 months of this year alone, we've recorded 119 shootings. Again, an alarming 80% increase. Comparative to last year, that's an 80% increase. I just want to emphasize that point. Tragically, 43 people have been shot. The results of today's work are important because of what you see here before you, but the reality is projects like this prevent harm to our community. And this is the mission of people like Chris and the team that he represents. And again, I would like to commend them for all of their work. The second point I would like to address is that this investigation involves, as you've heard, a variety of individuals who were already out on some form of judicial release. 2 of them were on release orders at the time of their arrests, and 1 was actually facing firearms-related offenses, and the other drug offenses. This continues to be an all too common theme in what police officers and investigators see. Nearly 50% of everybody we arrest for violent crimes out in our community are on some form of release, which is why, as the Chief said, we will continue to deliver the gold standard in policing excellence and enforcement, and at the same time, we will continue to advocate and address the gaps that result in the issues that I just discussed. Once again, thank you to our team that's responsible for today. Thank you to our Police Services Board and really all of the leadership in our community who's advocating towards change in the issues that I just discussed. On that note, I would like to invite Chair Nando Iannicca to the podium for his remarks. Thank you.
Deputy Chief, thank you very much, everyone. I'm Nando Iannicca, Chair of the Region of Peel, and I have the privilege of being on the Police Services Board as well, with Chair, and I'm honored to have Omar Khan here, one of my colleagues on the board, and our Executive Director, Rob Serpe. I also want to acknowledge the people you don't see, the heroes behind the scenes that we can't show you because their work relies on not being seen. But I got to tell you, when my day comes, there's so many stories I hope I can tell, because the amazing investigative techniques and the brilliance with which they solve crime is really movie of the week worthy. But we can't tell those stories, but those are for another day. But those officers are listening in, and a big shout out to them, because they're the ones who are responsible for this with brilliant investigative work. Today is a reminder of the immense dedication, skill, and persistence of Peel Regional Police, particularly in the work they do to ensure the safety and well-being of our community. Project Sledgehammer is a clear example of how proactive policing combined with expert investigation can have a significant impact. From a single traffic stop, we've witnessed a thorough investigation that led to the removal of 11 firearms, prohibited magazines, and a large quantity of dangerous drugs from our streets. These items, if left unchecked, could have fueled violent crimes like carjackings, home invasions, and shootings. I want to express my deepest gratitude on behalf of the board to the officers and investigators who played a role in this operation. The Peel Police Services Board stands with you, is proud to work with you day by day to protect the residents of our region. Public safety is our foremost priority. The increase in illegal firearm seizures this year, as the deputy said, 87%. 87% over last year, illustrates both the scale of the challenges that we face and the effectiveness of the resources that we are bringing to bear to deal with it. These numbers are more than just statistics. They represent lives, lives that have been saved, lives that have not been harmed, crimes that have been prevented, and a community that can feel safer because of the efforts of our chief and our police service. As a board, we are committed to supporting Peel Regional Police in every way we can to ensure that the resources, the training, and the personnel necessary to continue in these successful efforts are in place. The results of Project Sledgehammer underscore the importance of our continued investment in policing and broader community safety and well-being. To the residents of Peel, know that your safety is at the heart of everything we do. We will continue to work with Peel Regional Police and all levels of government to make sure our streets are free of illegal guns and drugs. Together, we are building a safer, stronger community with the help of our police service. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Iannicca. I now invite any questions, and I would remind you to please use the microphones on either side of the auditorium here. Please restrict your questions to one question and one follow-up question in relation to Project Sledgehammer.
Good afternoon, Chief. This is Nitin Chopra from Prime Asia. These 5 arrested people, because 3 out of 5, 3 have the same last name. Are they related to the same family? Because seems a 61-year-old woman, seems to be a mother or a sons. And what are their relations? And how they entered Canada? And what was the date of their arrest? Because today is 28th October. Are they, some of them, already out on bail, or they are still in custody?
So I'll go back to your first question. They are all of the same family. It is 2 brothers and a mother. As far as I know, the brothers were born in Canada. I can't comment on the mother. I don't have that information in front of me. I'm sorry. You had a couple other questions in there.
How they entered Canada, since they are born here, so
yeah.
That's fine. And date of their arrest, and are they already out on bail?
So 2 remain in custody. The one brother, Navdeep Nagra, remains in custody. The other subject, RH, he remains in custody. 2 were released from court after their bail hearing, and 1 was released on the day of on an undertaking. What was the date of
The date of arrest?
I'm going to have to follow up with you and get that information.
Okay, thank you. Follow-up is for Chief or Deputy Chief. There was an incident, same like armed intruders last week in Brampton, and we would like to know, residents want to know if they have a licensed legal gun weapon with them. And if there is a home invasion by the armed intruders, what are the rights of homeowners? Because last week, one of the Bramptonian homeowner, he opened fire on the intruders and they ran away. So in that case, residents want to know what are their legal rights if there is a home invasion by armed intruders. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Neaton. Good to see you. The reality is, yeah, it's very clearly defined in terms of legislation and what a person can do to protect themselves and protect somebody else. And at a base grassroots level, a person is allowed to use a reasonable amount of force to protect themselves or somebody else. But this is a complex question that, I can tell you, that particular incident wasn't under, will always happen with consultation with the Crowns and legal minds that are really much brighter than mine. But the way I understand it is the level of force that anybody uses has to be commensurate to the threat. And that's where some of the complexities and difficulties in explaining that situation is. But, I think we're having this conversation because, as we said, people are beginning to feel unsafe in their homes. And they're asking, well, how should we protect it? The reality is this is how we protect it. We remove the illegal firearms, as we've demonstrated here today, but as we've demonstrated at record-breaking levels here in Peel, we're doing everything we can to remove firearms from our community, so this is a conversation and a reality that we don't have to have or experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Nando, want to make any comment on this, please?
Thank you very much. Well, I appreciate the comment and your question about those individuals that might be on bail or previous crimes. I do want to dwell on that because, it's become a theme and it's of great concern. We have a great privilege as elected officials, especially in this position that we hold now. We have the privilege of representing the public, and then we have the privilege of working alongside fine officers like this. And something's fundamentally wrong when we have that privilege as elected officials and we keep putting citizens and police officers in harm's way because of just what you referred to, bail, the revolving system of justice, the fact that so many of them are that bad penny that keeps coming back. Of all the startling information, half the people that we pick up for a crime are known to us and have done another crime or are on bail. Something's got to give on that front, which speaks to your question. The second thought from your question that concerns me as well as someone that's lived here all my life, getting to the point where people think they may have to defend themselves. It shouldn't have to come to that. It shouldn't be our role as individual citizens to take up arms and have to defend ourselves, but you can understand why some people feel that way. So I hope the message, and I want to be clear, I know the Premier gets it. Premier Ford has been a tremendous fan on the law enforcement file and understanding that something needs to be done. Minister Kersner has been outstanding and a great friend of Peel. Just today, Minister McGregor, talking about bail reform, says something needs to be done so that people know they face consequences when they commit crimes like this and don't go out and do it again just so we can put our officers back in harm's way. Thank you very much for that question.
Hi there. I guess my question is for the chief. It's Shauna with City News. An 80% rise in gun violence here in Peel Region is obviously very concerning and alarming. I know we're seeing it in Toronto and other areas of the GTA. Is there any theory, working theory, like why are we seeing gun violence rise so significantly? Is gang activity picking up? What is going on here?
Yeah, Shauna, thank you for the question. So, the easiest answer is the availability of firearms has increased. And I think that was our key point being is if you go back 10 years and you ask investigators that were in this space about the ability for a criminal to seek and access a firearm, it was doable, but it required a little bit of work. The availability of firearms has just saturated the community. So, we're seeing people getting stopped for impaired driving, having a firearm in their possession. The firearms are being seized sometimes like as a secondary activity of the investigative efforts. Just the availability of them means that you can access it quicker. Accessing it quicker means there are more incidents of shootings. Disputes or criminal activity make it more readily available. The second piece is we're seeing things like today, the Glock switches. The more amount of rounds being discharged is also increased per incident. So it's compounded by that. You cannot be beside the largest border where in some states you can have permitless concealed carry, and then hear us try to negate the amount of firearms on the streets. It's sheer volume.
Okay, just my follow-up then. With
Yeah.
that said, what has to happen to stop the flow of these, firearms coming in over the border? We've been talking about it for, as long as I've been around.
Yes, Sean, I think if there's the three easiest buckets, and we across Ontario and the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, the Canadian chiefs have said there's three areas. One is additional support for investigative efforts on the street, and enforcement needs to happen. You cannot walk away from our bread and butter of projects like this, and that requires resourcing and support that's outside of what we normally provide on a day-to-day basis. That needs additional emphasis. The second piece is strengthening our U.S. and our border-related activities. That means strengthening our partnerships with U.S. intelligence agencies, enforcement efforts, going back to source states that have the highest volume of firearms coming here. So that's the second big bucket. And that does require resourcing and partnership. We're already doing great work with our U.S. partners, but it needs to be strengthened. The third is the big bucket is legislative and court-related reform. And today's announcement is one area of example of that. So it's an ecosystem that all needs to come together. And one without the other doesn't do the trick.
Bonjour, Jérémy Bergeron with CBC French Radio-Canada. Can you remind us the statistic of people being arrested? You said 50% of those were already known or already arrested. And what can we do to make sure that those offenders are not committing crimes again?
So I'm going to verify that 50% of the violent offenders we arrest here in Peel are already on some form of release. So they're already been before the courts and have conditions that require them to not do what we rearrest them for. And so that's just the reality. And just to highlight, they're responsible for the most violent offenses that we see. It's not just that they got stopped for a break and enter or shoplifting. As it pertains to the efforts that need to happen, and I'll say this again, is we'll see the federal government, C-48 had come in. We're still waiting to see the impacts of what that does for us. But our conversations with elected officials of all levels, federally and provincially, is that we do see that more needs to be done. And we've seen an announcement today of, I think, 5 to 6 different recommendations, which are far more poignant and laser-focused. We in policing think that all of them need to be looked at. Incrementally, things need to shift. So in a nutshell, has enough been done? I think we've drawn appropriate attention to it, but what we're seeing is a call for more to be done. And that specifically is for the small percentage of people that continue to harm our community need to be focused on. We're not talking about everybody that gets re-released. There is an opportunity, we believe, on those to get it back into the community and find connections to pathways. We're talking about those that have a propensity to create more harm, to become a victim, or to victimize the community.
This is Hamreen Kaur from Punjab TV. From last couple of months, we are seeing that a large number of arms and immunizations, they are being seized, they are being recovered, as well as the guns are being seized by Peel Regional Police during traffic checks, during traffic spots. During your investigation, what have you found that where were they heading to? Where were they sending those arms and ammunition? As per the investigation, what's the update on that?
Well, thank you for that question. The reality is a large percentage of arms that are smuggled into the U.S., because that's generally where they come from. The chief mentioned 90% of illegal handguns that we trace find their origins in the U.S. And just by virtue of demographics, logistics, and really attractiveness for organized crime, they end up landing in like large municipal hubs, very similar to the GTA. So, we have them destined for the GTA and other densely populated areas because it's, again, a big consumer base for them. And just really quickly, I think the important piece about that is to show that we have organized crime that doesn't reside here in Canada that is targeting our communities for profit. And this is why you also reference traffic stops and like the traditional policing. That is so important that we continue that and that we appropriately resource our frontline folks to be the first line of defense from organized crime that really exists elsewhere, not just in the country, but outside of our country.
Hi there. Kyle Sorrow with CP24. This question comes from my colleague Beatrice Faceman with CP24, and we're just kind of touching on more about what you guys have said about recidivism. So either chief or the deputy chief, you could speak to it. With everything you've said, with everything kind of possibly being implemented here to tighten up bail reform, how would this truly impact policing in Peel Region? Will it be like, will there be great benefits? Will it be small benefits? Like, what are we looking at here, really?
Yeah, so, the reality is the community needs to be served in every possible way. And their needs vary from, us being able to respond to support them when they're in crisis or when there's an emergency. But impacts like violent crime, firearms, shootings, they draw a tremendous amount of resources for us here at Peel, which pull us away from day-to-day needs of a community. And if you want to have and focus on a community's safety and well-being, it needs to also have a strategy to look at repeat violent offenders. So recidivism is a significant problem. I had a deputy tell me about an individual who was arrested by proactive efforts of our gun and gang teams, our Specialized Enforcement Bureau, that had an ankle bracelet on a former release for a previous firearms offense, sitting in their vehicle with their surety, but in possession of a loaded firearm. And so these are the anecdotal stories I'm giving you. But can you imagine the harm that individual causes? Yes, there are multiple strategies that need to be employed, and maybe I'll turn it over to Nick to maybe walk through a couple of them.
Thank you, Chief. And specific to your question, efforts like this are a few pages in a chapter that is really Peel's community safety. And that chapter exists in what we're doing collectively outside of Peel to address the gaps that exist that we don't have the purview of making decisions about. There are, and the Chief had referenced it, in order for us to be successful, we have to identify where the issues are, and then if we can't make the decisions on those or require people to make the changes, we need to bring them along. The issue of firearms and the violence we're seeing in our community, while a lot of times people will look at police and say, what are the answers? We aren't the ones that have the autonomy to make those decisions. But currently, we are in a position where we can encourage our partners to work with us and begin to bring some of the people that do have the decision-making autonomy along in order to make it better for our community.
And if I could, I just wanted to top that up on behalf of the board and Omar that's here as well as me. The fine point that I want to make is on behalf of the Police Services Board and protecting our officers, to me one of the most odious parts of this when you talk about recidivism is these in the majority are the same people going out committing the same crime because of bail or lack thereof or weak sentences, et cetera, et cetera. The point I want to make is you're one of the fine officers, you're one of the men or women that puts on a uniform in Peel Region and saying, what are you doing today? I'm going out to chase the person I caught last week and hope this time his truck doesn't run me over and hope this time his bullet misses me because they go off every 30 hours. How on earth does that deal with your health and well-being? I used the analogy before, Sisyphus, that person in Greek mythology that had to roll the boulder up the hill and was condemned to seeing it roll down all the time. That's how police officers must feel at times. And you just hope the boulder doesn't run over and kill you next time around from the same person that you put aside last week or a month before. So on behalf of the officers, and I think the public feels this, and we have to have their backs, the fact that we don't want you going out there and going after the same people that you've brought to justice, and yet justice doesn't seem to be fulfilled, and now you've got to risk it all over again the next morning to go chase the same individuals. And that's what recidivism means to us on the board. We have to protect our officers, and that means bringing people to justice and not this revolving door where you've got to go deal with them again next week. It's simply unacceptable. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, this is Monarch from Y Media for Channel Y. My question is to Nick and Chief. So you just mentioned that we need traditional methods like traffic stops because they are very important. to stop crimes. But at times, due to lack of resources, a lot of things that should happen don't happen. So my question is there any strategy or plan to make sure there are ample resources, or how to balance the resources with the amounts of crime happening?
It's a very timely discussion that the Police Services Board and us as a police service have as discussions. If you just look at the rate of growth that the region has experienced, the chair, maybe I'll invite the chair to speak to that right after. We are looking at probably the fastest rate of growth in any urban municipality in Canada going to be experiencing it here in Peel. If you combine that with the fact that we have a confluence of all the 400 series highways, the largest logistics hub, got a Pearson International Airport that we're responsible for, and an amazing community that deserves, to be looked after. If we do not meet the needs of our community, if we can't respond effectively to the volume of calls for service, be there when we need them to be there, we are going to fail this community in the years to come. So without a doubt, we want to be appropriate stewards of the resources we've been given. Here at Peel, we believe in finding alternative solutions. As Nick mentioned to you, we want to bring other partners along to help off-ramp some of the pressures. But you just cannot deny the fact that we're in an urban environment that requires boots on the ground. And that is one of our considerations amongst other things in looking at other solutions, multi-sector initiatives, technology and platforms, working with our other partners in other jurisdictions. But not one solution is going to resolve crime, social disorder. It requires sort of a multifaceted approach. And that's the hallmark of what we do here in Peel. And you can see it in everything we do. Today we're talking about violent crime and gun offenses, which unfortunately, from time to time, a hug is not going to solve. And so we need to make sure we investigate, put them where they need to be, present them before the courts, and make sure that we have the best cases that we're presenting to the justice system.
I do just on two, and the chief didn't give you the full story and sold himself a little bit short. I think this needs to be borne out as well. We chase bad guys. We've got to put them in jail. We've got to bring them to justice. Equally, if not more important, we have a community safety and well-being program in Peel. We were the first ones to approve it during COVID, ahead of any other region in the country. The chief co-chairs that committee. That's where we want to help youth, want to help people in need, and off-ramp them earlier on. And we are devoting a great deal of resources to that, to get them educational assistance, to get them housing, things of that sort. So I don't want to minimize that at all. That is where our salvation lies. But you still got to chase the bad people and bring them to justice. And to the core of your question, and the chief reminded me, he and I were in Halifax a couple of weeks ago doing a presentation on, we were asked to, the great work that we're doing in Peel. And I mentioned to them, Halifax, did my homework, Halifax, 500,000 people. I said, if the chief and I were to come for 5 years, in 5 years, we bring 100,000 of you to Toronto, the GTA, Mississauga region of Peel area, that's how fast Peel is growing. In 5 years, we will absorb all of Halifax. In the next 30 years, by 2051, the area you're standing in will be absorbing the population of Montreal and Vancouver. In a bad year, Peel adds 60,000 people from our international airport. They call it Toronto, it's ours. In a good year, we add 100,000 people. We're glad to welcome them, but we're at the precipice of a huge growth in population, and we've also had some challenges with, we're not a small town or small city anymore. We've got some big city urban crime issues, and we're at a crossroads, and we're not going to let it get out of hand, and we're going to do what it takes to resource the police and let people know that we believe in law and order, and we need help from our partners to also know that we believe in criminal justice and that you will pay a price for your crime. But your question is so well put. We're just getting started on the next phase of growth. We'd better do it properly, we'd better resource the police properly, and we'd better set the tone that this is unacceptable, and we're going to tamp it down, and the police is doing a lot of work in that regard and some success, like the number of crimes that have gone down with stolen cars, but we need more resources and we need to do more because the challenge will only keep growing. Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, thank you everyone for attending. This concludes our news conference.
Thank you very much.